Hi everyone, I'm Jane, and today we're going to paint a misty, dreamy autumn scene. Make sure you check out the video description below for a full list of materials, and then hit that subscribe button if you haven't already so that you can paint with me every week. Now let's get started. Alright, today as usual, I have my 12 by 16 inch Frederick's Red Label canvas, fresh out of the package. I have not prepared the canvas in any way. And today I'm not going to do any drawing or anything, we're just going to jump straight into painting. And I'm going to start by building my sky. And to do that, I'm going to use my 1-inch flat brush, and I'm really going to use this brush for about 90% of the painting. So I'm going to take my brush and wet it in my jar, wipe it on the edge. I don't want to have too much water in my brush for this painting, but I definitely want some moisture. Now I've got some titanium white, ultramarine blue, and burnt umber, and all three of these colors are basics. But it doesn't matter, you can use heavy body, no problem. I'm just going to pull out a little bit of burnt umber and a little bit of ultramarine blue. See how I've got kind of a blue-gray going on there? Very, very thin, not very much paint. And then I'm going to get some white, mostly white. I just want to tint it with those colors. Now I know I want my sky to be right about in this area, so I'm just going to start laying that in there. If you're not positive where you want your sky to be, how much of it you want to show, you're fine to go ahead and just cover the whole top section with sky. That's not a big deal. I just picked up white, but there is still a hint of those other colors on my brush. Just enough so that the sky isn't pure white. I want a nice kind of gray autumnal sky. Let's grab a hint more blue. Just a little bit more on the blue side. Maybe do that up here a bit. And then I want to keep it more white toward the bottom. Light pressure to dust out brush stroke marks. And now I've got some cadmium yellow light. You could use cadmium yellow medium if you like. I just like the way the light makes a really pretty soft green with these colors. And this color is heavy body. I always use heavy body in the cadmium colors because it's much more opaque, much more vibrant colors than in basics. I have not cleaned off my brush. And what I'm going to do is come in here, grab a bit more brown and more blue, still keeping it on the bluer side. I'm going to be super messy today with mixing my colors. I'm going to clean my brush very, very little. So I've got this pretty blue-gray, and I'm going to grab some yellow. Throw that in there. Just mix it until it's a green that you like. I'm going to keep it a little on the blue side. And decide where I want my first set of trees. And I'm going to say right here, just off of center. So I'm going to start by just laying down a brush mark. See, just laying that paint down. The sky is still wet, so it's blending. And then light pressure. See that my brush is not bending. I'm just breaking it up. Do not put too much pressure. Pressure applies paint. All I want to do is just break that up. Now I want to apply paint and break it up again. That's going to help give you that kind of misty quality. Let's pull a little more yellow in. And I think I want to bring my tree out this way, just a little more. So I laid down that color. Light pressure, see that barely touching. Just break it up. Down here to where my horizon's going to be. Lay down a little bit more. This is about how I'm touching the canvas. See that? See how much paint's coming off of my hand? Next to none, just barely touching. Let's go just a little bit deeper, a little bit bluer. Keep a little white in there still. Super messy. For all you guys who marvel at how tidy my palette stays, this one's for you. We're gonna have a nice messy palette at the end of today. So again, I'm gonna start right back here, and full pressure. Just get that paint off of my brush and come back and break it up. Don't worry about getting nice blends. We're not looking for blends. We're looking for color and texture and shape. Let's add a little bit of that over here too. Throw in a hint more yellow, maybe a little more white. Just a green color. And I'm going to lay that down there and break it up. Just going to zoom in here a bit so you can see kind of the difference between full pressure, which is laying down paint, and then that light dusting. See how I'm not really trying to get it to blend in with the sky. It's just kind of thinning out a little bit, giving the impression that this tree is kind of in the distance, giving everything kind of that dreamy look. A little more my yellow and white, kind of pop some brightness there. And I'm going to bring it down right about there. So part of it is going to be obscuring our path. Let's get a little bit of a deeper color. A little more brown, a little more blue. And we're going to darken it right back here. So lay down that color with the flat pressure. Super light pressure to blend it a little bit. Okay, let's darken this a bit. So still have not cleaned my brush. More brown, more blue. A little more on the bluer side than the brown. A little bit of yellow, just kind of a dark drab green. Good amount of pressure. See that? Full pressure. Just get that paint on there and break it up. So on this painting, you might want to work a little bit quicker. If you find though, or if you know that your paint dries quickly or that you are a little bit slower, that's okay too. Just maybe take a spray bottle and lightly mist down, wet the back of your canvas. That will help your paint stay wet just a little bit longer. You can even kind of break it up. You don't have to have this gradient. We could take some of our darker color and just pull it in here. Say there's a little bit of a shadow in this lighter area. Likewise, we can come in, grab a little extra white, a little extra yellow. Let's get a brighter color here. And we can come in and we can say, there's a little bit of a highlight right here. Whatever you need to do, whatever you want to see. Okay, I'm just going to set my brush aside because I'm only going to be a couple of minutes. If you're going to be more than a couple of minutes, please wash your brush off first. Now I'm going to go to my long liner brush, and I did wet this in my jar. I'm going to mix up some blue-brown. I don't care if a little bit of that yellow gets in there. It doesn't matter if it leans more toward the blue or the brown. I just need it to be a dark color. A little drip of extra water. Nice thin paint. And I'm going to start from down here and just kind of pull a couple of branches or twigs or something. Just kind of let them stop. They don't have to necessarily start from any place in particular. They don't have to go any place in particular. They don't have to be fully formed. Just get some little shapes in there that kind of indicate that there might be a branch in there somewhere. Nothing terribly specific or fancy or... You don't want to use black here. I mean, you can if you really want to, but I think that black is gonna, it's really gonna throw off the whole look. It's gonna be way too dark. And I think I'll do a few over here. See how dark that looks? And that's just blue and brown, and there's even a hint of white in there. Now I've got some cad red medium, and just like my yellow, this is the heavy body. And I still have my brush with all of my colors on it. I'm gonna come in here and grab a bit, mostly brown this time, but still, I've got the green and the blue and the white and everything on here. But I'm picking up a little bit of brown, and I'm gonna come in here and pick up a little bit of red. I don't want a bright red just yet. See, just kind of a muddy red there. And just like before, full pressure, lay it down just outside that color, and then break it up into it. I'm working quickly here, but my brush is still not bending until I go like that to lay down the paint. It's just breaking it up. Don't be afraid to pull it into there. Don't be afraid. In nature, your trees would not, worry about whether or not they're overlapping the tree next to it, or whether or not you can tell where one tree starts and another tree begins. They don't care about things like that. They just grow and they do what they need to do. And yes, this green is still a little wet, so it's blending with my red a bit, but I like that. My one caution is just don't overwork it. Don't, go back and forth, because eventually you're just going to end up with a muddy spot where there's no definition of the color. Let's take that all the way back, right back into here. Maybe a little more red. So Vince and I have been walking on this path lately around near our home, and it doesn't have fall colors on it really yet, but there's an area of the path that I know as soon as it gets some fall leaves, it's going to look just like this, and I'm really excited for that. All right, a little more blue brown, maybe a little heavier on the blue this time, because I want to really get a nice dark color into my red. This red and blue, they won't make purple, so don't worry that you're going to get purple. Nice dark color, see that? Now down here, I'm going to start right up into that red, and again, break it up into there. Lay it down, break it up, and break it up into this green all the way across. Take it all the way across. But as you break it up into this more distant green, just make your brush strokes much smaller. Very, very small. If you're not comfortable doing small brush strokes like this with this large brush, then you can wait on this part until we get to the 1/2 inch, or just switch over to your 1/2 inch right now. I'm going to call that good for now. Pull that down here. And let's get just a bit of that going over here. Break that up. My green over here is still a little bit wet, so it is blending just ever so slightly up on the tip of my brush, because this, I want my brush strokes to be horizontal. That's going to be our path. Let's get some blue brown, nice and dark, and we'll fill that in. The ultramarine and burnt umber, especially in the basics, are quite transparent. So right here, if you can see quite a bit of your canvas, it feels very transparent to you. I wouldn't worry about that because we're going to add a couple layers, so don't sweat that. I know some of you guys, when your paint is transparent, it kind of derails you and you stop and try and figure out how you can get that to stop being transparent. Don't worry about it. Break that up into there. Let's take this back here just a little bit. Maybe I'll throw a little hint of white in there. A little more yellow because it's a bit on the red side. See, I have not cleaned off this brush, not a single time yet. Let's start breaking that up. Bring it out into your trail just a little bit. I'm just using the tip of my brush. See that? Almost like sketching. It's laying down very little paint because I'm not using a lot of pressure, but there is quite a bit of paint on my brush. So remember, if you start putting some pressure or if you go flat, you'll fill that all in. I don't want to fill that in. See, I'm scrubbing over that edge just a bit. Kind of helps to blend. It also picks a little bit of that red up and kind of smears it in. And I like that a lot. Here I do want to lay down some paint, so I went flat and then up onto the tip of my brush. All right, still have not cleaned off my brush. I'm going to grab some yellow. I'm going to grab some red. I'm going to throw it in my white here, lots and lots of white, and get just a really pale, neutrally color. You see that? I say neutral, but it is a little on the yellow side, so it's slightly warm, but it's very, very light, and I'm using very, very light pressure again. Everything where I left the white of my canvas is kind of what I'm scrubbing into. Not trying to keep it separate from those colors I just scrubbed in. Scrub right over top of them. Just really wherever I left the white of my canvas. If you feel like you want to use a colored underpainting on this painting, that could be really nice too. And then you wouldn't have to worry so much about filling all of those white spots. Strangely, I didn't even consider an underpainting on this one. I don't know why. Probably because I just started painting it, you know, almost as an afterthought. Kind of used my idea of what that trail that we walk on might look like this autumn. And just kind of started going with it. I feel like my trail got just a little bit too narrow there, so I'm taking it over that. If at any point you feel like your brush is too muddy, like maybe you're dragging too much pink into everything, or you know, you're trying to get a really dark color but you've got too much white on your brush, then go ahead and wash it. I have not reached that point yet where I feel that way, but I very well may. I'm going to grab a little more brown. Just test that out there like that. I'm going to add just a hint of some dark into the trail, because our trail isn't going to be just, you know, solid light colors. It's going to have some variation, especially if maybe it rained the night before. Some of the earth is quite wet. What I really want you to do here is not necessarily try to, you know, put the same colors where I'm putting them. What I want you to do is really kind of feel the scene and feel the techniques, you know, as you scatter the paint like that. I want you to be mindful and pay attention to each brush stroke, because I think for me anyway, it's a really good way to paint, and it really helps me be aware of what it is that I'm doing, and it helps me to slow down. You know, if I can find joy in each individual brush stroke, then I can stay focused on what it is that I'm doing and not get frustrated and you know, not be so judgmental. I just picked up white, but I have all those colors on my brush still just using the tip. And since all that paint I've already put on the path is still wet, it's just blending, and that's nice. So be aware of that. Don't, you know, scribble over the same spot too much because you'll just blend it away. Really all I'm saying is I want a little bit more light right here. There's some more light there, and then I can scatter it. So it's really just like what we did with the trees, how we laid down a big blob of the color, and then from there kind of scattered it out. I like to feel the scene that I'm painting. I don't like to, you know, just paint something just to paint it. I like to feel a certain connection to the scene that I'm painting, but you can't really do that if you feel frustrated or if you feel, you know, if you've got this judgmental attitude toward every brush stroke. Then you're seeing it as a painting. You're not seeing it as, you know, kind of an emotional connection that you're trying to make with an area. Okay, I want to start getting quite dark in a few areas, and to do so, I'm going to have to clean off my brush because there's a lot of white in here, and I don't want that. All right, nice clean brush, and I'm going to get some brown and some blue. Again, it doesn't matter if it leans more blue or more brown. I just want to get the darkest color that I can with these two. There we go. And it's not a perfect mixture. I've got some blue and some brown on their own on there, and that's fine. I'm going to decide where the bottom of my trees are over here, and I'm going to come in with some pressure and lay that in. That's going to be the bottom of my trees. Break that up. Break it up. Let's even take that up a little higher. I think my brush is too wet. If your brush is too wet, but the color mixture you've got on there is what you wanted and you don't want to wipe it on a paper towel, just take a paper towel, hold it to the base by the ferrule, and just hold it there for a minute. And that will suck a lot of the moisture out, but keep your paint intact. So that should be better. Let's break that up. Just remember, don't judge. Don't look at your painting right now and judge it and think, oh, I can see blue. Why would there be blue in my tree? Maybe there would be. Let's take some of that dark color across here, and again, breaking it up. Really just using the corner of my brush there. Kind of pull that up a bit. I'm going to take that all along here. Maybe even just a little more on the blue side there as we move farther back. Blending with your fingers, always acceptable. See, I think that blue is a nice shadow color. This section might be a little wet just because my brush was so wet. So we might have to come back to this area to really get it darkened up. Let's just throw a hint of this color right up in here. Break it up. Maybe we've got a darker area right in here. Yeah, let's let that dry for a minute. Okay, that's still a little bit damp, but it's much drier than it was, so I think I should be able to work with that better now. So I'm gonna go to my 1/2 inch flat, and I'm gonna get, let's see, I think just some blue and brown to start. Just a nice dark color. Let's actually darken this up a bit over here. So just like before, lay down that color and then break it up. And I'm going to lightly break it up into this green. And, you know, because the blue and the brown are quite transparent, all of the colors that it's covering are still going to show, and that's good. That's what I like. So, for example, where it overlaps onto the green here, you can still see that green through there a bit. So it's going to help kind of give me a nice transition from the red into the green. A little darker right in here. Really, I'm making up a lot of this as I go along. This is going to end up being quite different from my first run through. You know, I just kind of did this on one run through and really liked it and decided, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And I think basically this will be the same as that first one, but it'll be quite different too. So, you know, when you do this, if you feel like, well, it doesn't look like Jane's, know that that's perfectly okay, because mine doesn't look like mine. I say that to you guys all the time. That's because it's true. You know, mine doesn't always look like mine either. Okay, back into that dark color, a little closer on the blue side than on the brown side. And I really want to darken this up right here where the base of these trees are going to be. I'm not worried about this. This is going to kind of be the ground where some leaves have maybe fallen. So I'm just going to break it up into that. Lay it down fairly heavily there. And break it up. We haven't added the bright parts of the red tree yet, so if you get like a weird hard line there, that's okay. Don't sweat that, because I'm going to put the bright part of my tree over top of that. And I'm using my brush pretty dry. I'm not getting any more water, not unless I feel like I'm seeing way too much texture. And even then, I might dunk just a tiny point of my brush into the water and then wipe it on a paper towel. Because if my paint is too wet, it spreads too much. I get more brush stroke marks rather than this really soft kind of, you know, hazy look, which is what I prefer, is this kind of hazy look. Okay, let's go into our red. I have not cleaned off my brush. I'm just going to come in and pick up some red. I didn't mix it necessarily on my brush, I just picked it up. And right over here, I'm going to lay that down and start kind of breaking it up. You can even break it up into that darker color a bit. A little bit more. So see, I'm getting a lot of texture and my paint isn't moving so well. So I'm just going to dip the point, just one corner of my brush into the water, and then I'm going to take a paper towel and I'm just going to touch the tip of my brush to it. That's it. Don't get crazy and start dunking your brush into your water, because if it's too wet, it's going to be really hard to get rid of brush stroke marks. And see how far I'm holding my brush and kind of how I'm holding it. It's pretty loose. Pull some of that bright red over here. Maybe even just a bit in there. Whatever feels right to you at the moment. You really are allowed to just kind of make decisions as they arise. Let's get a good amount of red. Come over here, pull out a little hint of that yellow. So see, this color doesn't look terribly different than what I just had, but when I lay it down next to it here, it's a much brighter version of that red. tip of the brush and just kind of squidge it back and forth. Get it to blend in both in brush directionality and color-wise with the road there. A little more yellow. Just drop a blob of it there. And pull it around. I think I'm going to grab a little bit of brown, because right here I kind of left a line. So to me what it looks like is, you know, when you're on a dirt path and kind of part of it has washed away, that's kind of what that looks like. So I'm going to go with that. Take some of that brown, maybe even a hint of blue to darken it up a little. And pull that dark color right there. A nice sharp line. And then kind of squidge that down a bit. And the cool thing is, if I decide I don't like that later, I'll just come back and put the red back over it. But for now, I kind of like it, and I'm kind of seeing little things like that in a couple other places, and this was not something I had planned on doing. But now that I'm doing it, I really like it. I'm even going to take just a hint of that most of the way across this side of the path. And that might kind of help push the path down a little bit. Say that all of this growth is up just a little bit, and then the land kind of moves down toward this path. Let's throw a hint of white in there as we move back, because it's a little more distant, so those darks are not going to be quite as saturated back here. And actually, one other thing I wanted to do is get some white and almost make that trailhead disappear into the horizon. I don't want a real noticeable difference right here where the trail starts and the horizon starts. Let's go a little brighter on our orange. Holding my brush far back, I'm going to stand far back so I can really see kind of where I'm putting this. And I'm pretty much just starting with that light pressure. A little heavier pressure there. Drop a bit more of that color in. I know this part looks kind of out of place right now because nothing else is this bright. But we will get some bright colors like this in our tree. I just picked up red there. I had a bit of white on my brush that kind of muddied up my color. So maybe I'll let that dry and I'll come back to it. All right, just gonna grab a bit of red. And we're going to start making some brighter points in our tree. So I'm going to lay down that little blob and break it up. Take it over top of your darker color, because that's going to help push that dark into the tree, deep inside the tree. If the light, bright colors overlap the dark, that's going to give your tree dimension. Otherwise, if the dark overlaps the light, it's going to make your tree look a little bit more flat. And see this little brush stroke that I'm doing? It's really like just these little kind of pull downs. And I'm even taking some of this brighter color, see that, over top into the green. And that's going to help pull this red tree into the foreground, say that it's overlapping these trees in the distance. Over top of that dark color. Tap that back part out so it fades. Maybe I'll grab a little yellow too, just brighten this bit up, just a little bit. Say that this tree has, you know, some colors going on in it. It's not just red. Be really careful. I feel like, and it could just be, you know, my personal preference, if I put the bright yellow in here on its own, I feel like that's gonna look kind of out of place on this tree. So I'm always gonna mix it with just wet my brush a tiny bit there. I'm always gonna mix it with just a hint of that red. Little brush strokes. See, and I feel like if in the back it's nice and dusted out like that, but in the front we have some harder lines, that kind of helps say it's, you know, a branch that's kind of hanging down. Let's get some nice bright colors in there. Tiny hint of yellow. Make sure you're standing back to look at it. That dark is still kind of wet, that's good. Blending in there. I think that's good. I'm just gonna take some straight red, nice and bright, intense, and just kind of pop it in some of these areas. This tree is really going to be an attention getter. That's what we want. There. Now the ground here doesn't look quite so out of place because we have some bright colors up above it too. And see how those dark colors that we put in here, they start to look like the interior of the tree. Now that kind of looks yucky right there. I don't like the way that that overlapped. So I'm just going to go back into my brown and my blue. And just kind of dust it away. Again, I'm not cleaning off my brush. I'm going to come right back to it, but I'm going to go back to my long liner. I've got a little extra drip of water. Get my nice dark color on there. I am going to go a hint on the bluer side just because I feel like that's where my two colors are the darkest. And we'll apply some branches. Now my branches in here, I'm not going to, you know, just start and kind of wherever. I'm going to kind of take a cue from my tree here and say I'm going to start right here, right above that red bit. And take it to there, stop at that red bit, and maybe it continues over there. It can overlap your tree, but you want to be a little bit selective about how it overlaps your tree. Let's pull a little bit over here. Nice big branch there. If you feel like you get crazy with your branches and get too many, just put more of your colors over top of it. In fact, I'm looking at those green trees in the distance. I feel like they are not quite done yet. Let's get some of this red going on the other side of the street. So I just picked up some red, kind of mixed it a little bit with what I have on my brush, and we'll start kind of laying it in here. A little blop of the color, pull it out into the street there, and break it up here. However you need to. I'm kind of doing this little scrub back and forth, so it's just the tip of my brush. Kind of wiggled side to side like that, but as I go. I'm going to throw a little bit of brown in there. I feel like that red is just a little bit too red. A little too true to red. I'll just get a hint of it back here. I think that's good. Let's go into our green. Let's make some green. Yes, I still have red on my brush. I know that's really going to freak some of you out to paint like this. Some of you are not going to like that. But I love to paint like this, and I love the cohesion that you get with all of your colors when, you know, everything is almost like a little bit of everything. I'm going to pull a little extra blue in there. Some yellow. See, and that easily went green. I'm already going to put brown in it, so it doesn't matter if there's red going into it too. What are we doing here? We're getting a green, maybe just a tiny speck of white, just a tiny speck. And let's just, this is too purple, and I feel like it's too dark. So I'm going to get a little more white, a little more yellow. Get a nice pretty green going on in there. I don't need to lose all of that purple, but I felt like it was just a bit too much. Maybe a hint of it over here too. I like that. Now the paint on my palette is starting to dry, so I am having to dip into just a little bit more paint or water here and there. Nice pale yellow color. Yellow, 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 white. Let's take just a hint of this over top. Not everywhere, but, you know, just here and there, just a couple spots. And that little hint of red that was still in my brush is giving a bit of warmth in there. It's kind of nice. I like that. A little extra white. You can skip this part if you don't feel like you need it. Just kind of wanted to see what would happen. Not too bad. It's very subtle. I didn't add, you know, crazy amount of color. Let's see how it's covering some of those branches a bit. All right, I cleaned off my brush because again, I want the darkest color I can get here. And I'm going to put a tree right here. So I'm going to get my blue-brown, and this is going to be quite transparent. Please don't stress that. If you're doing this part and your paint is very transparent, please don't stress that. Pretty even mixture of the two. It could even be a little on the bluer side, that's okay. Decide where I want it, and I'm going to start it right about here. Right about there. And I'm going to bring it up. We'll say pretty much straight. Maybe we'll give it a little bit of a bend. Now we can get quite a bit of paint and really fill that in. So I'm still just using the edge of my brush. Pull it down, slowly put a little bit more pressure just to let it widen out a bit at the bottom. Let's give it a secondary branch. I think just one. Start right about here and just kind of about like that. And if your branch looks weird, my branch looks pretty weird. I think it's okay. You can put some foliage over it and you won't even be able to tell. I'm going to widen my tree just a little bit. There. Okay, let's get more of that color. And a little point of white, just a tiny bit. I'm going to come in here and kind of pull that from the side. If my paint is too wet, I might need to let this dry. I think I'm going to let that, let's see. Yeah, I'm going to let my tree dry for a little bit before I continue trying to highlight it because it's pretty wet. Okay, I decided there was something else I needed to do to my tree before I can highlight it anyway, so it's a good thing we stopped. Still on my 1/2 inch flat, I'm going to get my blue-brown mixture, a little heavier on the side of blue. And some yellow. Let's mix up a green. Throw a little white in there, just a little bit. That was way too much white. Let's see how that goes. So I'm going to make some foliage that's in the tree that's still kind of green, and we're going to layer the foliage so it's not, you know, all of the branches on top of the foliage or all of the foliage just on top of the branches. So I'm going to start kind of right here, just lay down some of that green, still holding my brush very far back and standing back. So I lay down a little blob of that color and pull it out. My brush is quite wet. So again, I'm just going to touch my paper towel to the ferrule and let it absorb a bit of that water. It's very similar to what we did in the red tree. Maybe just fracturing it just a little bit more. Let's throw a bit down here. And we can come back and add more green later too if we feel like we need to. See, not even all of my brush strokes touch. Some of them are completely disconnected, just like leaves would be in a tree. Taking it quite far out, quite far. So to really make this tree look like it's overhanging the road. Let's get just a little bit more going on right about here. Maybe there's some up here. We can't see what that's attached to. This tree is quite large. One of the ways we made this tree look large was by taking the trunk straight up off the top rather than saying it's all branches now, right up off the top. Just hints of that green here and there. I think that's probably good for the green. We'll come back to it, like I said, if we need to. Actually, I think I'm going to just brighten it a little bit. Just in a few places. A little extra yellow and white. There we go. Okay, now our trunk is dry, and so we can paint it back in where we covered it with the green, and we can do our highlights on it. So my brown, my blue, we'll just cover up where that green covered it. fill in any horribly blank spots. Okay, so I've got my tree pretty much filled in. My dark color, a little poke of white, and we'll just kind of come from up here and just lightly slash in just a little bit of white. Don't worry about trying to make it look like anything in particular. Don't worry about putting it anywhere in particular. I am going to skip where my branch is connected. Take that all the way down, or at least most of the way down. It might not have quite so much highlight at the bottom there. I'm going to make this color a little bit more on the brown side and get a little bit more white. See, I'm just kind of touching. Just pull it to the side. It's really the same thing as what we've been doing, where we're laying down the color and then breaking it up, except we're not really breaking it up. Just kind of laying it down. I might break it a little bit, but not too much. And just let that white kind of taper out as we get down to the bottom there. You can even come back with your darker color if you need to. If you need to cover up anything that you felt like was too bright. And on our branch, same thing. I'm going to start my branch right there in the tree. We don't need to worry too much about getting real crazy with the highlights on the branch. Mostly I just want to do it right there, so you can kind of see where it comes from on the tree. Let's go back to our long liner, and I want to add a few little branches, as dark as possible. A little extra water to make sure these colors flow. Don't try to control the long liner, you guys. Let the liner kind of do what it wants to do. That's how you get these nice twisty little branches. And I'm still holding it kind of far back. I'm gonna start right about here and just kind of, maybe there's another little guy that comes off of it. And just like any brush, the harder you push, the thicker the line is going to be. So yes, this is a very narrow brush, but if I put a good amount of pressure, I get a fat line. And one thing I like to do to make a fatter line is to go flat and then kind of squidge it side to side. And see, I can get a nice long branch that's much wider at the base. Let's take one over here. See, I made that a little bit wider. Take it all the way off the edge of the canvas. Let's get a little secondary guy off of it. Maybe there's a little piece of a branch hanging down here from up above. I think that's going to be good for now. Once we've got the red on, we can come back and add some more if we feel like we need to. Back to my 1/2 inch. I'm not going to wait for this to dry because it doesn't matter if I pick up anything. I'm going to get this blue-brown mixture. There's just a little bit of it here. Get that on my brush. Come in and get some red. Really mix it in there so that red's not too bright to start. And let's go ahead and start adding some. So again, these small brush strokes, break them up. My brush is not bending, but it is too wet again. There we go. So if you can see right here where you can see the texture of the canvas through my paint, even though it's covered in paint, that's how you can kind of tell that your brush is too wet. So let's cover that much better. Don't follow your green. These are different branches. That area was still pretty wet. Break it up a little. pull some from up here. I like that it's picking up a hint of that green in a few places. A little more solid paint there for the hangy bits. Right now I'm just kind of placing the red. All right, I'm gonna get a bit of yellow. Let's get that warm color going again. Now I tend to think the warmer color, the more yellow, is closer toward the edge of the branch, or the outside. So it's gonna be a little bit more yellow there and a little bit more red toward the interior. It's like where these branches hang over, we'll put the yellow on the edge. See, let those brush strokes be really fractured and broken at the ends there. If you have another brush that you prefer to do foliage with, that's perfectly fine too. Just kind of going back and forth between the red, the orange, the yellow, just trying to find exactly what I want to see. If I get really quiet for a minute, it's because I found a Zen place, which is really rare while I'm filming videos. And don't forget to stand back and look at it from a distance. All right, I cleaned my brush off. Let's just get a little bit more pure color, a little bit of red. I'm just gonna pop a few points of red. I'm really just using the corner of my brush. And let's mix a bit with some yellow. I think maybe we'll add a couple extra branches and we'll be about done. There we go. I like that bright saturated color there toward the end, so it doesn't blend in with the background so much. Really just picking up a little bit of yellow, but I've still got the kind of orange on there. That was too much. There we go. Long liner, let's do some blue brown, get a few more branches in, and then I feel like I'm probably done. Let's bring that one in front. There we go. Okay, I lied one more thing and then I really am done. I'm just gonna get a little bit of extra white. I'm just gonna kind of pop a couple brighter highlights in just a couple places on my tree. And that is really all I'm doing. And I'm gonna sign up. And there's your dreamy autumn path. I hope you enjoyed painting this as much as I did, and I would love to see what you come up with. To share your version of this painting with me and the rest of our community, make sure you join my Art Monster Squad community forum on my website. Just go to paintingwithjane.com/forum. Thank you again to my sponsor Frederick's, who generously provided this awesome canvas that I used in today's video. In the video description below, there is an affiliate link to Amazon so that you can get your very own awesome Frederick's canvases. And thank you, as always, for painting with me, everyone. I'll see you next time.